Hey everybody, I'm Jason Ward, and next to me is Doc Brown.
Hey,
I mean Rob.
I had a vision.
And yeah, you guys probably think I have a pretty sweet wig this week, but it's actually Ironside. Ironside. Because we're going to talk a little bit about remote viewing and UFOs. I find it fascinating. I'm in no way an expert on this stuff, but I read an article and I think that's fun. So if you're looking to have your mind blown with some truth and scoops, not here, but I am going to do my best. And yeah. And so
hold on. We should do a show. It's just called Truth or Scoops.
Truth or Scoops?
Is it the truth or is it a scoop?
Is it a scoop? George Lucas had the idea for Star Wars aboard a spaceship. Truth or scoop?
It's all about the spaceships, actually.
George. Yeah. So yeah, let's talk about your bud for a sec.
So I just want to dedicate the show to my buddy Christopher W. Barton. He passed away recently, just found out about it. He's my buddy for 21 years, met him in the Army. We actually bonded over, it was right when I bought the novelization for episode 1. So I want to say like late April, early May, right? So around mid-April probably, 1999. Yeah. And that led right into, I was doing a Red Cross thing where I was injured, so they put me in a Red Cross building. And I had to be the guy that woke you up if someone died, but I couldn't tell you. I had to take you to the Red Cross building because no one wanted that job. So hand it to the droids. And the day we met, they were erecting this giant antenna outside. And they were like, hey, you going to help out with this? And I was like, there's no way. 1, I'm injured. And 2, that almost killed Art Bell. And my buddy Chris looked at me. He's like, you know who Art Bell is? I'm like, yeah, I know who Art Bell is. And so we bonded over that. And so over the years, we grew together. I mean, he was more family than my family, so it really does break my heart. But he loved the first show you did with Jason, and he was looking forward to seeing us together. And I don't know if he did or not, given the time frame you might have passed. But this show's to you, Chris. He loved The Thing. He lived out in Alaska in the Arctic, and he recently, right before COVID hit, he was stationed up in the Arctic on security, and he just played the theme music and did a video of him walking around in the snow blizzard. So he got to live his ultimate dream, at least, you know.
And you were saying he was really into the like the missing people phenomenon kind of thing.
His favorite was the David Paulides shows with George Knapp. I want to say 2014, 2015, when he was doing all the people who disappear in forests.
Yeah,
you know, and like I remember. Like specifically the one where like was it Paulides was saying something like make sure you have a GPS tracker on you and a revolver, you know, and you'll never have no one's ever I don't know of anyone who's disappeared who has had a GPS tracker and a revolver on him.
Right.
So it was like okay, you know. And Chris, he actually lived in the forest he had some weird financial issues for a while, and so he lived up in Alaska, so he spent some time in the forest for a couple months to rough it. And he was like, I got a GPS tracker and I got a revolver. And I was like, he lived the life, man, you know.
Yeah. So. Yeah, no, that's whenever I go camping or something like that, that's always when I get creeped out, when I think about like UFO abductions or something. I'm not really afraid of Bigfoot coming or something like that. I just have a vibe that if I meet Bigfoot, it's going to be Harry and the Henderson style. That's what I think. You know what I mean?
You know what? That laugh is endearing. It's probably the greatest laugh in the history of cinema. And then Eddie Murphy, but that Harry and the Henderson's laugh, just every time you see it, you can't not laugh. It's so good.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, I kind of like I said, as a kid was super freaked out because alien abductions were everything back then. Like whenever you didn't really hear about UFOs, or I shouldn't say you didn't, but overall, like the coverage I feel like on unsolved mysteries type shows was always like alien abductions, Fire in the Sky, Intruders, the TV movie. Like that was the stuff, at least to me, that like was like really stood out. And
well, my earliest interaction with the idea of UFOs
Mm-hmm.
was two memories. One, the scene in Close Encounters when Richard Dreyfuss is in the truck and that light just beams over it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and like all the mailboxes are going
That's when he gets the sunburn.
yeah, he gets a
Yeah.
sunburn. That and that other scene in the movie where the kid is in the kitchen and he opens the door. It's like, and the
Yeah.
mom closes the door.
Yeah.
So well shot, you know,
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah, big time. Like, yeah, the like use. That's the one thing about Close Encounters that I think makes it totally timeless is the use of light, because that's pretty much the one thing that you always have associated with the phenomenon. Is some people are like, I'm sleeping in bed, and then all of a sudden it looks like it's daytime outside, and I look outside and there's a little UFO, and then they're coming for me. Do you think if here's a random weird question, excuse me, if that happened to you tonight, would you freak,
Well,
or would you be like, okay, like this is my time, here we go?
so two things. The short answer is Bob Lazar described going into the UFO once, right?
Yeah,
When they let him like take a peek in there.
right.
And Bob Lazar has a certain affect in the way he speaks.
Mm-hmm.
But when he talks about that moment, it's in a different tone. There's a shift. And
Mm-hmm.
he talks about it like he was in a sense of awe, like he wasn't supposed to be there. You know, like you ever when you were a kid, you ever step into like your dad's office or like maybe the principal's office by yourself or somewhere where you're not really supposed to. It's not like you were sneaking in somewhere to get
Like
something,
a Star Wars set. Yeah, I get
like
it.
a star.
I get it.
You just put on the Jar Jar hat and glasses and just walked on. Misa here.
It's me.
Hey, oh boyos.
Yeah, the albino
Filoni's
gungan.
Paparazzi. You know, so I feel like the sense of not supposed to interact with this would be the feeling I'd feel. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if anything, I think that'd be the feel. And then go ahead.
No, as a kid, when all of the horrific UFO stuff was coming, or I should say abductee stuff was going down, I was just like, no, hell no, I will Home Alone these little grays. Like, get ready for my micro machines. I will kill you.
Shouldn't have that been Home Alone 3? You know,
Yeah.
like the alien where he just keeps the aliens out.
And it also excuses his parents for making the same mistake. It was their minds were getting messed with by UFOs. And
Or what if we just do it now where he's older? You know what I mean? And he's just fighting off an alien abduction in his house, you know?
That might revitalize the whole franchise. On a side note, the other day, I can't remember what platform it was on. They were like, oh, and like HBO whatever, it's like you could watch all 5 Home Alone movies. I'm like, 5 Home Alone? What the hell are you guys talking about? There's 2.
Home Alone 4 or 5, one of them it was like with this group of like heisters.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually pretty good. Like it's not
That's
a cinematic
the aliens
film.
talking. That's not you. That's not Rob.
I know you feel that way, but I didn't ever watch it when it came out.
Yeah.
William Bibiani, who's you're familiar with him. Like he was on the Schmodown. He's like a writer, like a film critic. We have some shared interests like Animaniacs and
Gladiator
Dragon
movies.
Half, the anime Dragon Half. But he had mentioned that Home Alone 5 is like a really underrated film, and I'm like, that's such an odd take to put out on the internet. I gotta go like rewatch it, and I give him credit. Like it would be like, you know how Die Hard 3 is an acceptable sequel to Die Hard 1, even though I know Die Hard sequel should exist given that movie was about reconciling with your marriage kind of film. You know what I mean? Like ultimately, Home Alone 5 would be like the Die Hard 3 to
So I either need to watch this movie now, and it is streaming on a platform I own, or I subscribe to, so I can, or this is the greatest troll of all time.
And if you know anything about William Bibiani, it's Schrodinger's cat. It's both. Like
Right. Yeah. But anyways, today, I think if it happened to me, if I was just chilling in my room and I saw the lights outside, or woke up and there were little dudes around me, I think I probably would be startled, but I think I'd go. I think I'd be like, all right, guys, what are we doing?
Well, I'm gonna give you a story quickly. You weren't
Yeah.
prepared for this, but this is, I told you I had two experiences in my life, right?
Hmm.
Maybe three. The Phoenix Lights, that thing at the Dark Knight, and this
Yes.
story, which I rarely, I was like, maybe I'll never share this, but I shared it with Chris once and he was like, what? And so this
Hmm.
happened. I used to live in, after my parents got divorced, we moved to National City and there's a mall called Plaza Bonita. And
Hmm.
right in front of Plaza Bonita Mall, there's this road called Sweetwater Road. It's a vertical, almost vertical road. It's a big hill. We lived on that road. The very top of there was this park.
Hmm.
And so I'd go there with my mom's boyfriend's oldest daughter, which was in high school, Bianca. And I was
Hmm.
in the second grade. So we'd go to this park and she'd go there and make out with her boyfriend, you know what I mean? And I'd be like, I don't want to go near him. And I didn't like to play on the jungle gyms because people peed in these tubes, you know, in there. So you'd go in there and just smell like piss. And you're like, I don't want to. So I got bored one day and there was this fence and I went down this hill and there was this farmhouse and all these kids were painting this farmhouse up. I was like, oh, this is dope. And they took me around the farmhouse and they were like, yeah, over here. And this is going to be my room and their room. And then they looked at me and they said, would you like to stay? You can stay. And I
Hmm.
was like, I think I gotta get back. I gotta get it back. So I went back up the hill, climbed through the hole in the fence, this little hole, and Bianca wasn't there. So I went back down to the house.
Yeah.
I was gone for maybe 15 minutes, but she come running up. She'd been looking at me for 2 or 3 hours.
Damn.
And she was very mad because
Yeah.
she wouldn't let me leave the house ever. Like she wouldn't take me to the park. This wasn't like a memory I had, right, by myself. And I kept thinking maybe I should have gone with those kids because I didn't like where I was living. And and I'd been watching, like it was so weird. So months later, I snuck out of the house and went back down there to go see what was going on, right?
Hmm.
And that barn house was rusted and hadn't had a drop of paint on it for 50 years, bro.
Yeah. So what do you think? You think ghost?
I have no honest clue. And I'll
Yeah.
tell you, for the next 2 years, my mom eventually she left me on my father's doorstep on Christmas. And it was just something
Sorry.
that I had stuck in my head. Like I should have maybe gone with those kids. Like stay with
Yeah.
those kids. It was just that weird thought. I don't know what that is, man. Like to this day,
Yeah.
I have no, but that's the closest thing to one would say missing time. But it was an interaction. And I had a witness, I had a person who would never let me go back there because she was like, you're not leaving the house. I'm going to get killed.
Yeah.
So super strange.
Yeah. I found it fascinating that, excuse me, Lou Elizondo, studied the immune system. That was one of his two majors in college. And they're the guy I think that we're going to be talking about today. I believe I could be wrong, but I think Kit Green has done work on the immune system and or spoken about the immune system and has a theory about it with UFOs as well. And basically, like when you start looking into the immune system and how it works, it pretty much, to my best of my understanding, and I'm probably butchering this, so if somebody's an expert, you're gonna just kill me, but it essentially records every interaction you've ever had with everything. And there is a theory in ufology that when a UFO encounters you, they are able to tell if they have encountered you before based off of your immune system, and pretty quickly. And so and it's one of the theories about why do people have repeated or multiple scenarios or occurrences of the paranormal. And it's almost like this idea that once it does happen, then it's more possible it will happen again to those experiencers, or however you want to call, whatever they should be called. And so I find it interesting that you had the story you shared on the other episode where the dude just walked through your house, which is
Yeah.
super freaky,
So that's
you
about
know?
2.5 years after that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so and if you buy into the theory that all of this stuff is connected through some kind of interdimensionality or something like that, it's a kind of a fascinating kind of take. Reminds your story you just told reminds me of this episode of the Twilight Zone I watched where there's a movie star mom and dad type, and they have this really fancy pool, and these two kids, when they jump in the pool, if they dive down, they're able to dive down, swim back up, and then they're at a farmhouse or like a big house with an old lady inside and a bunch of children, and like they want the kids to like stay, and the kids are like, they're like, oh, we got to get back home, and they can hear their mom or something, so they like go
Huh.
home, but they're like, if
That
you
is
leave,
weird.
it's just like, if you leave, you can't come back.
Yeah,
And then
because
they
they were
like leave.
clearly fixing this place up. Like it was
Yeah,
painted. I could smell the like they were. And when I went back, I was so confused as a kid. I was like, it was just empty and dead, like rotted wood, and
yeah,
I really had no answers for this. And I just went back home and was like, well, okay,
yeah,
like, like who are you supposed to talk to in 1986
right,
about this
yeah,
sort of thing,
yeah.
Yeah.
That's like, yeah. And with that, we kind of, I think that's where this kind of, I'm glad that you shared your story, because in a weird way, it kind of connects to like these two feeling, they seem like disparate things: remote viewing, astral projection, and then UFOs. But there's all kinds of like, there's some people that seem to be shysters, like selling meditation apps and shit like that, that seem like it's all about, grifting in a way. But there does seem to be a connection there, that even the people who appear to be legitly delving into the subject matter, talk about like, even like an Elizondo type, if you think that he's completely on the up and up, like, on a side note, kind of getting distracted here, but on a side note, what is your take on Elizondo? Are you like, do you trust him?
um I don't know.
Yeah,
Like
that's fair.
I really don't know. He didn't come on my radar. So my math on this is a little fuzzy because I around the 2015 mark I started kind of getting out of regular UFO info just because of my career and life. We moved and stuff, and both my parents died in a year, so like I got
Yeah,
distracted. And so every now and then I'd listen to just the George Knapp shows, and so I remember the Tom DeLonge, and
yeah,
then Tom DeLonge disappeared one day, and it was Jeremy Corbell, who has a very unique voice, right? Like
yeah.
his voice is very unique. And then the Alejandro, am I getting it right?
I'm not sure.
Is his name? I'm sorry, you're the military guy.
Oh, Elizondo.
Elizondo, sorry.
Luis
Told you I'm horrible with names,
Elizondo.
my
Yeah,
friend.
no
So
worries.
Elizondo. So, and then he comes on, and I was like, all right. So he reminded me of who's the British guy who was part of like in the early 2000s, who came out of the British part of like their Operation Paperclip. You know what I mean? He came out.
Is he? We're talking about the guy who does the basement office sometimes, or with
Yeah.
yeah, it's on the tip of my tongue. But
I
that
was like, so
guy,
he's our version of that guy.
yeah,
Like yeah, the other Jason would know that the name I'm talking
yeah.
about.
Oh yeah, and I forgot to say, Jason had some a family event that he had to go to, like the day after our last show. He's like, hey, I'm not gonna be able to make it. We'll have to do it the week after. And I was like, okay, cool. So next week we're gonna go back to the idea we talked about last week. But I decided that we would just kind of keep this one loose and go over an article I liked on UFOjoe.net, and then next week we'll have Jason back. But go on.
So I started listening to a few things with Elizondo, and I just came across one interview where he said something that I thought was a little cringy,
Mm-hmm.
where it was he was likening like people like debunking UFO people or people talking about UFOs or UAPs to being racist on some level. And
Mm.
I was like, that it just felt like a bad take. Didn't feel like a
Yeah.
bad character take, but I was like, I don't know. Like I feel like
Mm.
sometimes with him I'm hearing a little bit of the military, like they're a
Nick
little
Pope.
too pro-military. The military, like when I came out the military, we in 9/11 happened, I was a little brainwashed too, and I still feel like I'm hearing some of that sometimes from him. So
Yeah. Well, to be fair, in his defense or whatever, I haven't heard that one. I watched a ton of his stuff, and I haven't heard him say that one in the
I'm
other stuff
certain it
I've
was just a
seen.
dumb bad take, dude. It's not.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he probably does hundreds of interviews, and if you
right.
talk enough, you're gonna misspeak and say something bad. Like my thing is, it's so complicated because he has that background, and ufology has such a history of disinfo being part of the official game that the government plays with people.
Hmm.
I mean, that's pretty much, I think, the one for sure thing about all of this is they have messed with people. and they have done it to protect national intelligence secrets and maybe to disguise or to disrupt people finding out what we're really dealing with. So when you have that, and then you have Elizondo, who's the one who pretty much defects, jump ship, if you will, and then but tries to do so legally. It's like, number one, that was always going to happen. If it wasn't Elizondo, it would have been somebody else 20 years from now, 30, eventually,
Right.
somebody with a moral compass and who understands the gravity of the situation would do exactly what he's done. But when he, with his background, a lot of people don't trust him. They think like this is a disinfo, this is part of the disinfo campaign, and they buy into that. And to that, I say, why would you cast somebody who is obviously so apparently with that background? Like in a lot of ways, I don't think Elizondo is the ideal Elizondo. I mean, if I
Right.
was
And
going
who
to,
is? I mean, I'm not the ideal. Like I told my wife, I was like, when you
yeah,
pictured the man of your dreams, I'm certain I wasn't it. You know what I mean? Like, it's
no,
just
but
not kind of how the human mind works. But I will
yeah,
say, I give Elizondo way more credence than Philip Corsa.
yeah,
Like,
and by that,
100%. Like,
I'm saying if the government was going to do a misinfo campaign, why go pick somebody who already has these very public and apparent, like this apparent past? You could go and have somebody who did nothing in disinfo, nothing in intelligence for, and then essentially have them do what he's doing, and no one would be on to it.
well, I
So
think after
it's
Nate Doty, people have just had a healthy sense of skepticism, you know,
yeah,
because a lot of credible people like Linda Moulton Howe, who did for years, did tons of real credible journalistic research into the cattle mutilation situation, right? With
right,
no flamboyancy, no, theatrics. But George Norrie once tried to call her mistress of the night or something on Coast to Coast, and she fucking railed him on air, bro. Like it's one of the
yeah,
like he came back and like, yeah, she's like, no, I'm a journalist, George. Like, dude, I wish I could remember the exact, let's say 2005 or six ish, seven, somewhere around there. But
yeah,
I was like, I gotta dig it out because it's so great. But Nate Doty fed her a bunch of bullshit, you know what I mean? And so it can't happen.
yeah,
I think though, if Elizondo would, I mean, I can't say there's a timeline on when it would come out, kind of thing,
mhm,
like who's feeding who bullshit. But um, it doesn't seem to. He doesn't seem to be. Again, you hit that point where they don't have more info to give,
yeah,
right? So then you're like, well, when they hit that point, do they start inventing stuff? You know, like, and
right.
that's the mark, right? Like that's the part where we all have to say, okay, like there's only so much info you can really come across, unless it's like new physical recordings, like on the radar stuff or anything like that.
Yeah,
But I'm talking
that's
about like,
how I feel about Jeremy Corbell. Like and for the record, like I think that dude is he's a bit rock and roll, and he's like a bit of a showman. But at the same time, his work and the stuff he's done, I mean, his interviews with Bob Lazar are quality. I think the documentary at times does a little bit of the cliche stuff and it plays that game. I don't know if that was because he needed to appease investors or something. I have no idea why it was that way.
or he just
But
made it
or
interesting. I mean,
or he
with
just
the
made it that way. But the journalistic side of what he did with Lazar, of letting Lazar tell his side and his story is quality. I mean,
yeah,
it just is. And the videos that he's released have been amazing. So like on like Corbell, I worry what happens down the road when the sources dry up or there just is nothing and he needs to or wants to perform and can't. And hopefully he just goes on to something else and makes a documentary on Bigfoot or something. You know what I mean? But but on Elizondo, I think he I think he is probably on the up and up right now. My thing that I wonder about is what happens when we get 5 years out or a couple years out and the government internally catches up to where Elizondo was last year, and then they're kind of on the same page again, and maybe he goes back into the fold, and then we don't know. You know what I mean? He becomes, and then that's where you could have him kind of being a mouthpiece for the government again, and there could be manipulation in that way.
And then
But
people discredit anything he said before. Then yeah, there's a lot of what ifs.
yeah,
As the dude would say, there's a lot of what have yous, a lot of ins and outs, man. It's complicated, you know.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So but Elizondo, I mean, in more than one time has basically suggested, this, that there is that the remote viewing stuff was rather amazing. And I think he says, like, I wasn't in charge of that, but he doesn't deny that there's like a connection there. And when you see like all of these like leaked documents that have come out in the past, that a lot of them appear to be at least plausibly legit, as much as you
Well,
can, confirm something that is unconfirmed.
the remote viewing program happened. The problem is
Yeah.
guys like Major Ed Dames, there's a name I do fucking remember,
Uh-huh.
comes out and monetizes it around 1999, 2000, to be on Coast to Coast every month selling
Yeah.
his hire me to find your lost treasure bullshit.
Right.
or the Yuri Geller out, hire me to find oil.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, okay.
I think it's this story we're gonna talk about tonight. Yuri Geller comes up,
Okay.
and the
Let's jump into
remote,
it.
the remote person doesn't want to deal with him. It's not because she's like, yeah, like do you think Yuri Geller was a scam the whole time, or do you think he was simply trying to get fame and fortune off of a gift?
Yeah, man, dude. The early 70s are so tough
Yeah.
because there was such a blending of drug use and metaphysicalness and wanting to move beyond Vietnam and expand our minds and all that stuff. And it was hard to tell who was starting out genuine. Like
Yeah.
how many bands from the 70s, either sell or try to become like commercial MTV bands by the 80s and it don't work, right? Like,
Sure.
as much as I love Queen, clearly the songs of the 70s are far different than It's a Kind of Magic, right?
Yeah. Big time.
So, but Yuri Geller, man, that's complicated because you do get that scene in The Matrix, which I appreciate, which is based off his whole bending spoons thing, but
Yeah.
it could have just been a magic trick. You know what I mean? That he turned
Did you
into
know?
something.
Did you know he was suing Pokemon for like 20 years?
Yeah, I know. It's so
He let it
dumb,
go.
man.
He let it go. But
Yeah.
yeah, I thought that
I
was
stupidly I read that fucking article.
yeah.
Yeah, what was it like? Vox or Kotaku did a whole article about a year ago, like long too, like the secret
Yeah.
thing about some mind-bending Pokemon card from the 1999 that he's been suing for 20 years, and he finally dropped it so people could get their fucking, because he got so much hate from the Pokemon community for not
Yeah.
allowing them to put that Pokemon in another game. And he eventually just dropped it.
It's pretty funny, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always run into a weird thing where people think monetization equates to grift every time. And that just simply isn't true. I'll be honest with you. If I had psychic powers and I could do amazing things, I would do amazing things, but I would also I'd have all the cable channels. I would use that power to, that's why I'm not worthy of it. I would, no, I'd have cable.
Cable, how old are you?
I'd have cable as a
Cable.
luxury because I can. You know what I mean? But no, I mean I would yeah, I don't see why monetization, like Bob Lazar, people are like, he never made $1 off of it. So therefore, and then it's like, no, he did things to make money off it over the years, and he's selling his sketches now. And I'm like, I think that's, we're talking about last time, I think that's rad. Sell your
Well,
sketches.
first thing he did is he sold a VHS tape, which my stepdad bought. So that's the one that's on the internet. We watched that back in the day. 2, he sold the rights to his story to the studio that ended up making Independence Day, whatever studio that was, the production company. I think Warner's or Fox made it, but the production company he sold it to, they wanted to, here's the thing, he sold his story to them, but they wanted to Hollywoodize it. So to get to the point where he has to like save an alien from the thing, or break the spaceship out and fly it. And when they would get to that Hollywood moment, he would give he had final script approval. He'd say, nope, just tell it the way it happened. And they're like, that's not a fucking movie, Bob. So they literally wanted to get something out of it. So they just made the crazy Area 51 Brent Spiner character like this over the top version of Bob Lazar. And so he went and he talked about it. He's like, I went to the movie premiere, and they're like, okay, So it's not that he didn't monetize it or he did monetize it. what I think that the sign was is when when they wanted to turn it into something it wasn't. That's when he said no.
Right.
That's what I'm most interested in, because, man, as you said, if it's catch 22, or if they say, hey, if you can see the future, if you have the ability to be psychic, why don't you go to Vegas and just win all the cards? Why don't you just predict the lotto? And if you did, then they'd be like, oh, why did he use his powers for evil?
Yeah.
It's like, well, which is it? Like,
Yeah, I was gonna bring up this article. I was gonna pull it up, but I figured we might not have enough time to do two, so I didn't. And it was a Vice article, and I found it to just me to personally have a weird connection to it in a dumb way. I have no idea if this is super huge or not. Like in terms of like this guy named I think it's Robert A. Monroe, and he was in industry, and he ended up having out of body experiences, and then he kind of, I guess, I don't know if obsessed is the right way, but became at least interested in how does this happen, and made a wing of his business. How do we use audio to induce out of body experiences, and and help with the meditations and stuff like that. And so when I'm like 15 years old, I am down in with my girlfriend. We used to go to used bookstores because there used to be a thing called used bookstores, and there's this box and it says occult books. It's like $15.
Tobin's Spirit Guide. Yes.
Yeah, it just says occult books, the whole thing,
It's
$15.
so good.
And it had Anne Rice's Lasher, which is I'm a big Anne Rice fan, and the hardback was in there, and I'm like, that's worth 15 on into its own to me. So I was like, okay, cool. So I buy it. I walk the box of books home, and then some time goes by, and I just start kind of reading through the books, and one of them is on actually I read Tell of the Body Thief, which is about out of body experiences, and I'm like, with the vampire trying to get his mortality back. And then I'm like, I have a book on that, I'll look at it. So I open it up, and basically it's this guy named Robert A. Monroe talking about how these meditations where you imagine heat going up and down your body, and then techniques like pulling yourself out of your body and things like that, and how you could like try like do like remote viewing. It's 1995. There is nothing going on in the world. You're a teenager with no car. I'm like, I'm gonna try this. So
Perfect.
Yeah, so I really was like, every time before I would go to take a nap or whatever, that summer, I was like, I'm gonna try it. And one time I thought I was seeing something, but it was so inconclusive and it was so weak that I just chalked it up to no. And then eventually, kind of found the book sort of useful in the meditative techniques that it was giving to help me fall asleep, because I've always had like bad insomnia, but never had an out of body experience, and then kind of forgot about it. Well, when I got back into the UFO stuff this last year, there's all kinds of stuff that official stuff where like the government was using Robert A. Monroe's institute to use for astral projection and remote viewing. And there was like a page that was missing from the like FOIA release documents on it. And the guy from Vice actually contacts the Monroe Institute, and they end up like offering him the page. They had it. It wasn't in the FOIA. It was like removed, but they just had it. They're just like, yeah, here, at first they're like, they had a bad CEO or whatever. He's like, we'll talk about it. He wanted to market them and stuff. And then that guy leaves. And then the person who runs it, who's still there, is like, hey, here you go. Gives it to Vice, and they like put it out. And basically like the government had used them to figure out a way to do astral projection effectively. And yeah, he does things, and like I won't get into the whole things. I truthfully barely understand it, but essentially you wear headphones, and it uses kinds of like white noise with frequencies that makes the brain kind of balance out, like when you go like right brain, left brain kind of stuff, I guess. And then when you're doing meditations, this happens to your brain, and it's supposed to sort of the government concludes this is the fastest way to get there. So I just thought that was fascinating, because I just happened to buy that guy's book as a teenager. And then so when these documents that I was looking at over here, I will pull it up over here on, this is a site I like called UFO Joe.
I
Yeah, it
like
sounds
the
like,
name.
yeah, isn't it a great name?
It's so simple. I like it.
Yeah,
Simplicity is it's beautiful.
it is. It is. And I don't know a lot about UFO sites, so if you guys have any recommendations for them, uh always send it my way. I would always like to have more.
And it's a
But
.net, so I got a lot of respect.
that's how I roll. I got both, but I prefer .net because it is a network of information, friends.
It's
But
right.
yeah, so I think this is Dr. Kit Green. And this source added that psychic was Kit's best psychic, and said the conversation between Dr. Green and psychic was recorded and given to a participant. I'll call that person experiencer. And a study that Dr. Green and Gary Nolan, PhD, have been conducting on people who have had close encounters with UFOs. So basically, UFO Joe is essentially contacted by somebody who's reading his work on from Reddit, and slips him this, like, the audio files, and the actual, um I don't know what you call it. That's the remote viewing session stuff. I just found it fascinating. She's all, Green accepts his patients carefully. They are all high functioning individuals, many pr- prodigious savants, and
Prodigious. Yeah.
most of whom carry a high security clearance. And so as it, okay, I'm going to go down to, where's the part where it begins? Oh, there's a whole video here. Hold on. I think I am losing it. Here we go. Here we go. So, okay, wait. Sorry guys. Wait, making sure I'm on the right spot. Okay. So, interesting. So, when Kit and I had our first phone conversation, she said to me, "I have a file on you that's over 1,000 pages." I thought that was interesting, though not surprising. So, anyways, here we go. The event took place in this is session 1. The event took place in late 1989 after the Thanksgiving holiday of that year. It was my personal experience. It was that night. I was in my car. The location was in Los Angeles on a small street. Although at the time I was not paying attention to that specific detail, nor seeking a defined destination or address. The selection of this location was essentially random. So they're giving the remote viewer a random location. I was parked on the right side of the road facing uphill. I was alone. I was seated in my car and in the driver's seat, conducting an activity that required the use of my hands. I had been parked for only a few minutes, perhaps 10. As I was conducting this activity with my hands directly in front of me, they began to glow luminescence. I continued the activity without much interruption, and as I did so, I could see my hands clearly in the dark due to the luminance of them. The glowing was at 3/16 of an inch in depth and was white in color. I do not recall any noticeable tint. It was an unambiguous phenomenon. It was consistent thickness or depth without any thin spots or other irregularities. There was no pulsation. There was no sound associated. It was a uniform glow of equal and consistent luminosity over every square centimeter of the skin that I could see. I did not look in the rearview mirror to see if my face was affected. I also mentally highly preoccupied at the time. I was also preoccupied at the time. The phenomenon lasted long enough to fully register. It was not a momentary flash. It did not come and go. It was a steady state condition that probably lasted somewhere under a minute, but most probably not longer. And then there's some coordinates that he obscures. And so as this goes on, just to make it like clear, like easier to potentially understand, it sounds like how they handled the remote viewing stuff is that at times there would, or at least in some programs, they would put somebody who was like the antenna, and the remote viewer and the quote antenna would have a connection. So they would, at times, from what I understand, would send the antenna into as the spy into the location, and they might, I'm going to make this up, I'm fixing the air conditioner, but while they're there, the remote viewer is able to use them to find all kinds of data. So I'm not sure if the glowing hands thing is a part of that, if that's like part of that antenna relationship or what the hell that is, you know? Dr. Green and the psychic both asked UFO Joe to keep her identity out of this. I heard someone else is getting ready to post this transcript elsewhere and they're planning on outing the psychic. That's fucked up. I hope that doesn't happen because I know she was scared and didn't want the attention. So I'm going to go on down. Okay. So the psychic intuitive is PI and Kit Green is KG. Okay. So the PI says, I'm recording, and today is February 20th, 2017. PI here, and I'm working on the case, 0.07, blah, 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 blah. I can begin by answering your questions about the events and then go to the person because I read for the person. I prepared in reading for the person on January 26th and then again on February 20th, both of those in 2017, which gives us two different peeks into the person. But I would like to give you my impression of the event. And then Kit Green says, let me ask you a question for clarification. Repeat back to me slowly the coordinates. And then the person does. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. They kind of go through and through. So Kit Green says, got it. All right. And you said that the readings of the person were done on what's the date again? And then he says the date. And then I'm going to try to get down to the more interesting stuff. Good. Okay. So she says, okay, so you said what occurred. That was your first question. And I put down now this. I went into a deep altered state. And, you just wrote out my impressions. There's a fourth dimensional portal in this area and the area of the coordinates. It's very near to the site. And the portal, which is a portal between dimensions, is related to an underwater base near Catalina Island, off the coast of Southern California. And on that date and time, a craft landed with occupants. I would say landed, or I would say appeared in this dimension. So yeah, let's just let that sit for a second. So basically, she's saying that there's a portal off of Catalina Island. And that's a pretty wild thing to say, and a pretty crazy thing, but at the same time kind of fascinating that since then there's been a lot of the UFO stuff in that area all the way down to the San Diego area.
Well, the Bud's training island is there too, near that same site.
Yeah.
There was a documentary done. Was it HS264 or something like H264? It was this Bud's documentary that was on the History Channel.
Mm-hmm.
Bud's Class 264, I think it was called.
Yeah.
Around the early 2000s. And at the halfway mark, once they get out of Coronado, they go to this training island out there. And you can see it when you're driving on the 5 going up towards San Clemente. You can see right outside of San Clemente, there's this haziness. And then there's these islands right beyond the haze. That's the Bud's facility, which isn't that far from Catalina. You know what I mean? I find that coincidentally interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's where, like I said, the idea of remote viewing and UFO stuff is crazy, but I found this one fascinating because of what it ends up, of that connection, I should say. Like if she was saying, oh, it's in, I don't know, it's up near San Francisco. We're like, well, okay, but considering what's been going on and what we've seen in videos in
it's
the
near,
last year.
Skywalker Ranch. Skywalker Ranch. Sorry.
Skywalker Ranch, yeah. Sorry, somebody needs to make the Skinwalker Ranch shirt with the Skywalker Ranch logo. Okay,
Ooh.
So Kit Green says, okay, hold on. I want to make sure I write down the base under those that was near Catalina Island. She spells out Catalina Island for him. And the next thing you saw off of Southern California, and then she says, okay, on that date and time of the event, a craft, I say landed. I would say it appeared in this dimension to land with occupants, which were partly extraterrestrial and a few humans as well. So there were, and then he's like, hold up, remote viewer. And she's like, some on board the craft were human. Okay. That's where there was a clarification here. So this particular event is part of an ongoing education of influential humans about preparing for a future potential event. The future potential event is a geologic destabilization in the area. I'll tell you more about it in a minute, but I'm going down and answering your questions. The second question you posed was, how long was the event occurrence? The event took more than 2 hours, but the witness's memory is partially blocked, and the witness does not remember the entire event. So is she saying that is she implying that these hybrids or extraterrestrials blocked part of his memory, or that he has the power to block her from seeing it? That's
Yeah, because
come
it'd be
on.
weird. Let's just say hypothetically. Let's say you got some alien drones are training some humans how to deal with some big geological event. But if the
Yeah,
humans can't remember the training, what be the point?
right.
You know?
That's true.
So that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. So, all right. So she says, wait, what precipitated the event? That's your question. That's the third question. Or no, excuse me. The third was, what was the cause of what occurred? And my response is, there was a planned meeting between high-ranking civilian and military personnel and the others, the watchers, the extraterrestrials, to give directions concerning geologic stabilization. And the others and the watchers comes up quite a bit. I mean, and extraterrestrials seems to be, obviously kind of a given there, but you do hear those terms, the watchers and the others, come up a lot. And on a just like on a side note, I was reading something on our UFOs this week. I wish I could remember what the thread was called, but it was somebody essentially implying that it was a guy who I think he was a military person who was doing interviews. I think so. I wish I'd written this down. I need to get better at this, and I will, I promise. But he was insinuating that Elizondo had told him they know who's in the saucers, but they don't know what's in the Tic Tacs. And so I found that interesting in context of these others and the watchers and all that kind of stuff. Like if any of those codes or if any of those terms play out, because you will hear them come up in various documents and stuff like that. And if we pretend this document's real, or if we go with it to analyze it, then that's super fascinating. And if we want to assume this document's fake, what a great throwback to the lore. I'm gonna give it credit either way. So let me throw us back in there. So she goes on to say, okay, so that's the fourth question on your email. Certain underwater, offshore, and onshore tectonic plate movements or potential movements inspired the meeting. And I feel that I don't want to go too fast for you. Kit's all, sorry, I'll stop you. If you're going too fast, I'll say hold. All right. Kit says hold when he wants you to hold. So she goes on to say, I feel that the tectonic plate movements were catalyzed by oil drilling and other incursions into the tectonic plate area by humans. What was the purpose of the event? That's your next question. And then so he's like writing this down. Kid's like, I gotta write this down. This is good stuff. Like George McFly. And she's
This is really good. Hold on. This is really good stuff. I gotta wrote it down. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm your density. Right. Got it.
you had 1 foot in George McFly and 1 foot in Morty on that one.
Yeah, Morty McFly. Hold on. I gotta put down my dent. You are the cattle. Oh my God. Oh, Darth Vader. Look, my favorite whole line of that movie, by the way, is he goes, when he goes, hey, so something happened last night? And George goes, last night Darth Vader came into my house and he told me if I didn't ask Lena to dance, he'd melt my brain. And he goes, all right, why don't we just hold off on that? And then George goes, okay.
Yeah, Crispin Glover is great.
So great.
So she goes on to say, by humans into the tectonic plate, the rather sensitive tectonic plate region. So in other words, parts of the tectonic interface there up and down the California coast. They're like locking points. They're like trigger points. Now I put together the next one, which is 5 and 6. 5 was, what was the purpose of the event? And then what was the agency of action? And then Kit's all, I don't remember saying that. She's all, okay, but I'm reading from your original email. Come on, Kit Green. Remember what you asked, man. He's all, so he goes on to say, okay, the agency of action was a council of 3 to 5 alien species whose mission is to protect and preserve the offshore base. That is that base down there near Catalina Island off the Southern California coast, and to monitor the activity of the humans in the area. So, so there's any agency of action, which is literally a communication between those alien species. They are 3 to 5 alien species. So Kit's all right. Now what's the agency? Toots. And she's like, number 5 is what's the purpose of the event? And I've already told you that the purpose was precipitated the purpose. Okay. And then the agency of action. I just put the agency of action together with the purpose, but it was warning by this group of ET species. And then I went to go tell you the cause. So, yeah, so basically I'm going to skip down a little bit. So they're going back
She says
and
the
forth.
cause of the destabilization of plate tectonics in the area by human offshore and oil drilling and other activities as we destabilize the plates. You know,
Yeah.
it sounds to me, if I were a failed screenwriter protesting vaccine,
Yeah.
conjuring up alien stories, failed screenwriters, they gotta hustle.
Yeah.
I'd go, all right, so if Aaron Sorkin watched The Abyss, you know, it was like, let me write together the aliens. Are like, hey, we can't move our base. You know, we've had this here for quite a
Yeah.
while. You know, like we got to talk to the humans and stuff. Here's my problem with it, right? Like,
Mhm.
are the aliens drones or living creatures that care? Because I mean, like, why hasn't one alien UFO ship, if they really cared about us or even their own systems, why haven't they put out a giant forest fire that's wrecking a third of the nation at any given year? You know what I mean? Like, certainly they're constantly doing weird experiments in forests. I
Yeah.
mean, perhaps I don't know. You know, like,
Well,
and what about
I
Fukushima? Like,
remember a couple of days ago on the Star Wars show, we were talking about on the Making Star Wars show, we're talking about Akira Kurosawa and watching Seven Samurai with the academic commentary and how much is explained to you that you just don't get if you watch the movie straight out, you know? Who knows what their culture is or how they, you know what I mean? Like for like what if, I mean, yeah, I'm just throwing that out there. Like it is a good question. And if they did just hell, we'd be like, oh, thanks, aliens. You guys are like Superman. Come hang out. Let's talk. Yeah, but there's, you know, yeah, I mean, when it comes to culture, rituals, and their point of view, I mean, who knows? But
yeah, I can't figure out some states in this country, let alone
and I mean, and in a weird way, I think,
aliens.
yeah, it's true. No, and in a way, I mean, you bring up like, I'm gonna go back to Anne Rice again for some reason because that's on my brain tonight. There's this line in Memnoch the Devil where Lestat the vampire is offered to become the devil. The devil wants to quit. It's like, Lestat, take my job. I don't want it anymore. You know, that old telling. And this conversation kind of comes out in there where he says, it's not that people don't believe in God, it's that they hate him. Because look at what he could have done with his power and he didn't do. So why I'm mentioning that is, how are we going to see these guys if they do show up? And they could have put out the forest fires. They could have told us about the earthquake in Haiti today, stuff like that. Like, are we going to be, you know what I mean? Like
You know what it
how,
reminds me of? This is so shallow, but I think it's apropos.
mm-hmm.
Is there's a line in South Park when
Yeah.
Cartman, where Stan wants to save the whales, and he
Mm-hmm.
goes to Cartman to help donate money or help him, and Cartman says, "No, look, I can totally do all those things. I just don't care."
Yeah.
And Stan's like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, I just don't care. Like, fuck him."
Yeah.
Like, I don't agree with that standpoint, but apathy. Look, man, a majority of our problems on this planet, I believe, my personal belief, is caused by apathy or lack of empathy. And
Yeah.
you know, I mean how we care about bees and ants when we realize if they disappear, we disappear.
Mm-hmm.
But aside from that, do we really give a shit about what bees and ants are up to on a day-to-day basis? Like if there
Nope.
was there could have been a giant civil war battle between ants that we don't even know that occurred in the last 50 years. You know that the ant cultures speak up for generations, but until them ants might, take over a whole community with their, their invasive behavior, then we got to get involved,
My Trevor Moore, who recently passed away, has a really really awesome song called Kitty History that I suggest everybody watch. And it basically, the premise of the song that the song tells you is that if there are alternate dimensions, if the multiverse theory is true, it means there is a universe with kitties where all of our history has happened, but with kitties.
Right. Well, I used to. So
It's
you
so
remember the
hilarious.
movie Cats versus Dogs?
No.
When this came out in the mid 2000s or early 2000s, and when I first heard of it, I for some reason it struck my fascination because I'm like cats versus dogs, and not in the way of like physical cat fights versus dog fights. I was interested in. I had this theory, and I knew the movie was never going to touch on this, but I'm like, yo, man, the Egyptians used to worship cats. You know what I mean? What if cats are like failed deities where they're like, they used to worship us and now you look what the dogs did. Like they somehow became man's best friend, but we used to run these humans. Like
Yeah.
they had a falling out with humans at some, and they believe that they should rise back to power. And I was like, this is the basis for my cats versus dogs. When I went to see the movie, it's nowhere near on that level,
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, that kind of stuff is I mean, is fascinating in like a lot of different ways because like we're talking about before, like that one dude, I need to know his name because I've mentioned him like 4 times now. The guy who talks about owls, how people always see owls and near like UFOs and near the sightings, and I'm always like, well, if you see most of them out in the forest, that makes sense. If you're looking it up and you see an owl, then the UFO catches your eye. That makes sense. But then there's other stories that are seemingly unrelated where like this, I was telling you about it. I read this encounter where a woman claims that she was about to be abducted and she had a big day tomorrow, and she gets pissed off and goes outside and is like, no, not today. Like she like knew this vibe that would come over her, or not tonight. And she runs out, and then supposedly she can telepathically hear the alien or whatever going, owl, 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 owl. and she's like, so it's like, okay, so there's this weird connection there, but between, at least in the lore anyways, between owls and abduction. And if all of this, what if all of it's true, all of it's accurate, then yeah, what if cats were a version of that? What if the cat, a cat was the avatar that they used to communicate with the ancient Egyptians or something wild like that.
in my
But
head, it was just cats wanted to rule humans and dogs figured out a way to befriend them. They're like, long term, it's better for their friends. And then, you know what I mean? Cats
cats
got thrown.
cats would do that too. Like that's what a cat would do if it could,
Yeah.
you know?
Because I wasn't a cat guy till I had this tabby around 2005. And I mean, we were best friends. I had him for 16 years till he passed.
Yeah.
But like, I used to walk in to get a pedicure with my wife at this pedicure shop, and they look at my arm and they go, "Oh, what happened to your arm?" And I'd say, "Oh, my cat." And they go, "Your car?" I go, "No, my cat." And they would go, "Your cat, your cat." I'm like, "This is how he loves me," and it's just injuries, like tons of injuries. And he was the nicest cat, but he'd have this. They'd kill you in a second. Like you always
Yeah.
get a feeling they're just not quite domesticated. So I just thought that would be the basis for Rob's. If I could get those Despicable Me people, to like make cats versus dogs, it would have been that basis. And then cats got to figure out a way to undo the dog problem. There
Yeah.
was a book my buddy owned. My buddy another friend of mine in the army, McKinnon. He had this book.
Hmm.
What was about like there was this disease that was killing off humans, and so
Okay.
humans decided to will their knowledge to dogs. And it was like this post-apocalyptic story after humans went away. They gave the gift of knowledge to dogs.
To
Yeah.
dogs.
To
Here you
dogs.
go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a feeling if dogs, I think dogs would want to be like, they would want to make themselves smarter and us dumber so that we like met in the middle and we're just great buds. and cats would just want to take over.
Rule everything. That's why I
Yeah.
love the concept of cats versus dogs. Like, I think it's a cinematic. If you take it along a cinematic, Anunnaki meets Tolkien meets stupid, Despicable Me. Like if I could get the Cloudy with the Chance of Meatballs, right? The Lego dudes. Like
Yeah.
if you add a certain level of stupid, I think it'd work quite well.
Yeah.
But it needs this epic scale. Anyway, to get back to this though, the the thing I have a question. So she says she has two targets, and the witness is someone that he has prior knowledge of, like it's a plant that she's
I
tapping into. I'm trying to understand.
that I don't understand either. And I just know that that there's a main person who they're targeting, and we'll end up getting into it pretty soon.
Or did they
Um,
just give her random coordinates and then and then a date?
well, that's why I was wondering if the other person was the antenna, so to speak. But it's hard to say because two interesting things about this document I should have prefaced it with was I don't think when this document like was first circulated and stuff, I don't think Kit Green was known as having done too much paranormal stuff. I don't think he was really known for that kind of angle. So if somebody faked it, they knew enough to go and to use somebody who was legitimately in doing stuff for the government. And so the document ends up falling into that weird space again, where it was straight up disinfo from an official government source. Like, like what's that one? Can't remember what it's called now. But there's a big document that was released like with like a general and stuff,
Like
and
the Majestic 12?
like Majestic 12 style stuff. Yeah, where they're
Right.
where they're like there's so many things about the documents themselves that line up with legitimacy that it and knowing who was where when and what times and that kind of jazz that the document has accurate, that it's hard to debunk. And
It's hard to
so
say too because then the Dead Sea Scrolls were found out to be forgeries, So it's like
yeah.
I always wonder if there was a more, I want to say, academic version of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, right? But if
Mhm.
there was something that was a little bit more um I don't know, thought through, where he's at the college and he is doing like, okay, is this real history or is this fake history? like,
Right.
like that would have been the great Indian teaching in class in his older years thing, like what do we know to be true? What do we think to be true? And what has turned out to be total bullshit, like forgeries. Like,
Well, like when you look at what she's saying right now about the environment, and then you take the Aerial School Zimbabwe event, so do we have essentially terrestrials of some kind that are environmentalists that are trying to stop us from destroying ourselves like morons? Or do people with environmental messages just happen to be crazy SJWs, man? Like, which is it?
or what it sounds more like to me, which gives
Yeah.
me some like, okay, I can follow along on some level, because she's like, it's not like they're like, oh, we care about the planet. It's no, we built something down there.
Yeah.
And now that's threatening our fucking setup. Like
Yeah.
look, never underestimate the power of space capitalism.
Well, I mean, it does sound like there's an insinuation. At least that's what I read. I understood it as that we are destabilizing the tectonic plates with drilling, and if we continue to do it, it could make a catastrophe. But
Sure, there's a
uh,
level of altruism, but the underpinning is that it could fuck their shit up too,
I should have to.
which I guess, the cynic in me goes, okay. You know,
Yeah.
like, yeah, a little bit of greed, I guess, makes a little more sense to the timeline, but sure.
Okay, so the experiencer is the guy who they are targeting, by the way. Okay. So she
Okay.
goes on to say the person that we're talking about, the actual target here, is what I have to say about the reason that it happened to this person. This case number .011, the target is vocal and an excellent communicator. It was believed by the others, the watchers, the ETs, that he would get to be able to effectively communicate the warning to others, not the others, just to other people. Now, I'm going to tell you more about the target in a few minutes. I'll go deeply into about the target if you wish. to separate that from this. But I'm just saying that I'm feeling is that this target was deliberately chosen for his potential to help achieve the purpose of the council. I'm going to call the agency of action this council. Mace Windu is mad about these tectonic plates. In other words, he was chosen for his potential to do that. And here's a larger pattern. This all fits into a larger pattern of behavior, which is more than just this event. The pattern is to place thoughts, insights, and information telepathically. And then Kit's all, are you saying spots like SPOTS? No. To place thoughts, Kit Green. Listen to me.
He's all I heard was cats versus dogs. Spots.
And then he's all, hey, did you ever play that Spot game for the Super Nintendo? I rented
Spot?
it. It was okay. It was okay.
No, anyways, I told you, Cool Spot would never betray us.
And then I sent you a picture of a UAP looking Cool Spot, actually.
You sent me a picture of Cool Spot riding a giant tsunami wave, which dovetails right into this conversation perfectly.
And then behind it, you can see like a little airplane or something. I was like, there it is. Insights, which would be like understanding the information into the minds of people who are able and willing and capable of spreading this throughout humans. The disclosure of alien presence will take place this way. In other words, by reaching what would be called a critical mass or a critical number of individuals who are compelled. Is that us? Are we compelled? And they may not understand why they're compelled, but they feel they are compelled to take certain actions, primarily protect the environment, make sure natural resources are protected, prevent nuclear annihilation, that kind of thing. But they're going to feel they're compelled to do this, and they may not totally understand why. So the disclosure of alien presence will take place this way, and many contactees, such as this person, will be recruited or activated. Let me try to zoom in on this and share their information at the right moment. Okay. So there are many individuals who are in the population now who have been contacted like this individual. Maybe not as dramatically, not in an event per se that could be pinpointed. Many of them will not or do not have conscious memories. And if you talk to them, they probably wouldn't even say they believe in ETs, but they will be compelled to protect the environment, propelled to essentially protect the planet or protect those parts of the planet which also are, should we say, important to the ETs as well. And I feel in this case, there is a specific base, and this base seems to be under the ocean. It is partly what we would call in this dimension and partly in a slightly different dimension. And it is definitely a physical presence where it is. I would also like to tell you something about this patient, this person.
All right. Time out.
Yeah, time out.
That's a lot. The cynic in me, right?
Yeah.
Or the, what do you call that? The critic, I don't want to say debunker, right? The cynic in me says, I feel like since 2017, a bunch of these people who feel compelled to do things have happened and have come out the woodwork just for the complete opposite reasons we see here. We have people who are like, no masks, fuck global warming.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like, and if these people, let's say a bunch of people who have been contacted for the last 30 years or whatever, do finally come out the woodwork, whatever's going on in the world now is really not going to help their case much. You know what I mean? When a subset of people suddenly say, we all feel the need to do the right thing in the world. Like, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, it's complicated for me too. Cause I believe this is what we should do. Right?
Yeah.
I believe this, but like, I'm not seeing them now. I haven't seen that 3 years from this date. You know, like, and whatever's going on right now, I feel could directly ruin this plan.
Yeah.
If it should occur in a few years, right? And then people go, no, remember that time a bunch of fucking psychos out there believe lizard people were their kids murdered their kids. You saw that story, right?
Yeah.
The guy who murdered his family because he listened to the I'm not going to say who,
yeah,
right? But who talks about the lizard people? You figure it out, right? Yeah. So I don't know, man. What do you think this is her? I guess it's a few. Okay, this person. I don't want to generalize this.
The viewer. Yeah.
Do you think the viewer is now giving their life experience like anecdotal like take on it versus right? They're just
I mean,
Feel
based off of what I know, or what I've read and what I understand about the concept of remote viewing, I don't know how you could divorce those two things. For instance, if you were, let's just pretend, um, somebody in the South has the same power that somebody in Southern California has, and you show them a Humvee. All of this just depends on the person in California, so you know what I mean. But let's just say a liberal and somebody who's conservative. You show them a Humvee, you're going to get two different interpretations, and you have a knee jerk interpretation based off of your
wow,
life
that's a real.
experience.
Hold on, you're.
Am
I had
I?
to think about that for a second because that's a really say what say what you want about the ethos of man, like
Yeah, yeah,
the tenets of National Socialism. Like,
right,
I'm quoting the Big Lebowski, guys.
yeah.
Right? At least it has an ethos. Nihilism. But I'm in a Walter Kochek kind of night, right? So, yeah, if you put a picture of a Humvee in front of a person who's a radical liberal and a radical conservative,
Mhm.
that image is going to spark two completely different responses off that one image. I mean, this is
Exactly.
a vehicle. This isn't like a historical figure.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
just a
like
thing. It's just a
that
thing.
is super, super interesting. All right, I
Yeah,
just had to think about that for a second. Like
yeah,
that.
yeah. So I mean, the old adage or saying that a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? And so if you, yeah, so the remote viewer is definitely, I think, going to bring in their own bias to it. Like, how could they not? At the same time, not having that power, and imagining being able to do it, maybe that power is corrective in some way. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like when you go to, maybe if you were to go view somebody, you would see what their perspective was 100%, even if it disagreed with yours. Maybe you'd feel a cognitive dissonance from it. I don't know. It would be cool to interview somebody who either has the power or believes that they do. And
The writer in me immediately goes, okay, so I now have the official sequel for M. Night Shyamalan's Signs. We're gonna call it Spots. Right,
spots.
right, right. And it's these people that are randomly around the world, right, that actually get activated, and they all been silently contacted by aliens for 40 years, and they're
Yeah.
there to help influence and change the world. But really, it's about thoughts, but they get it mixed up. But it has these little blips on the radar, so they call them spot. Like I can see how this easily could be turned into like an A24 Blumhouse sequel to Signs. Right?
Yeah, no, for sure. Um, as this goes on, by the way, spoiler by a minute maybe, we learn that the person who that they're targeting is a producer. What
A
if
movie
it's
producer?
Yeah, what if it's J.J. Abrams?
Oh, you mean like in the storyland or real world? No,
No,
it's a
in this
seriously?
in this story, yeah.
Oh no! Now you know anything? Have you ever met producers?
Yes.
Right? I know you
They
have,
they
but
like cocaine. They love cocaine.
like I have yet to meet one ethical movie producer. I'm just
Mhm.
just telling you that right now. My entire life, and screenwriters, it's 50-50. Like when you know them personally because they're constantly hustling. Like I've never met one person who actively made their money making Hollywood movies that didn't want me to spend my money on helping them make millions.
Right.
Like
Right.
so I'm like movie producers like what if it's John Peters? And he talks
I
to the
mean,
aliens about getting into street fights the whole time. Did you ever see The Death of Superman?
mm,
John Schneff did the documentary about the Tim Burton Superman movie, which that'd be fun to cover sometime
yeah.
because God bless John Schnepp, the late John Schnepp. But there's this scene where he's talking to John Peters, and he talks about how he's like used to get in a bunch of street fights, and he, I'm a fighter, and Superman needs to get into a fight. I'm a fighter, like, and you just look at this guy who's clearly way overweight, lives in he has those rugs on the walls. You remember in Get Shorty when they go to Gene Hackman's office, and it's this like 1930s like homage to like Hollywood with carpets hanging off the walls, and it's
Okay.
very, very You ever seen Get Shorty?
Oh, dude, I have, but I have
Been
not
forever.
seen it. Yeah, I have
Gene
not
Hackman's
seen it since
office
it came
is
out.
totally out of like my lights, Mr. DeVille, but like a really shitty low rent, version of that. And
Gotcha.
John Peters lives in this mansion,
Yeah.
and so these aliens taking John Peters down to like convince him to do altruistic things is really, that is the stuff. That's like the Coen Brothers version of Spots.
Well, I mean, imagine you're just this, Hollywood douchebag doing cocaine, getting Kim Basinger types in the movies and not putting them in the sequels because they broke up with you or something, stuff
You
like
really
that.
want a polar bear to fight Superman?
And then, yeah, you're like, I want polar bears to fight Superman, and then all of a sudden the aliens are like, you know what? It's time. It's time. We're going to awaken John Peters.
We're gonna
or whoever.
John,
you know what I mean?
Awaken the Peters.
Yeah.
His
Yeah.
fabulous hair, though.
Like, oh, yeah.
say what you want about John Peters. He has fabulous hair, like he does.
Oh man, yeah, or it's yeah. There's, I mean, yeah, Hollywood people, they mostly suck. There's some great ones. They mostly suck. I'll live pretty close to the place. Known enough of them to know that they are not that good usually. So, what are these aliens thinking? They're not going to get shit done because shit barely ever gets done in Hollywood. All right. So, anyways, about the person, blah 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 blah. Okay. So they've been okay about the person of case 10. I don't feel this person is a hybrid. So they're a good old fashioned red blooded American who has been monitored and abducted, but not in such a way that it was so traumatic that, it was overwhelmed everything since early childhood. This individual has been followed essentially in development, has been selected, and tissue samples may have been taken, especially early in childhood.
Omega, got it.
Yeah, he may actually have a scar on his body from early childhood that he can't account for, but he's not a hybrid, okay? She's like, not a hybrid, dude. Stop asking me. But has
don't
been,
murder the family. He's not a lizard person.
Yeah, he's not a lizard. He's just a little J.J. Abrams. Leave him alone. But has been chosen because of his ability to communicate. I feel that this
and
person
it's definitely not JJ. Sorry.
So I feel that this person is either a film producer or an activist or a very vocal person, very energetic. But what's really interesting is between last month, January 26th and February 20th, his throat area has really ratcheted down. So I feel he's blocked right now. And I got this sense that the quote unquote, these are the words that came to me. That's not something I usually use in running scared. I feel he's running scared, to quote unquote right now. Feels like a message of great importance is being repeated to him. He wants to get it out to the public or in a film or other means. There's a sense of urgency. I would say this person is a contactee, but not necessarily a hybrid, as I mentioned, but was chosen because of talents, innate abilities, or some connections that he has. Something
makes a mean souffle.
that would be a person who has the potential for being heard somehow by the greater population and not a carpet pisser. No, and very intuitive, but has a lot of anxiety. Also, it's more like free floating anxiety.
Dude,
like
the preferred nomenclature is hybrid American.
Hybrid red-blooded American. Yeah. Like something's gonna happen and feels like that something's gonna happen pretty soon. So I did get something unusual today as opposed to last time. I feel he's not feeling as well physically today. Blah blah blah. Because today what I picked up was he may be experiencing some other unusual autoimmune issues from stress. And there it is.
Give it 3 years.
Yeah, but I just find the autoimmune thing coming up again to be a fascinating theme or thread through all of these disparate stories, you know what I mean? And the immune system stuff. And yeah, so basically like, it goes on. And I think, we get the point. It's like like I said, you could read it all on UFO Joe's website. And I will put the link in the chat.
So seems to be an awful lot of discussion for a remote viewing. Remote viewing, as I understood it, having listened to Coast to Coast and the interviews for, I'd say pretty consistently from 1995 to 2010-ish, 2015, somewhere within
Yeah.
there, right? Um, was that it's more like they're able to describe facilities
Yeah.
and structural things, but I've never once heard anyone describe someone's like the target's like biological autoimmune response. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying I've never heard that before, you know? Like, so
The thing about this document, like I said, is that, you know, Kit Green ended up being is a real person and a real, you know, a real player in this stuff, and somebody who is quoted pretty often by the, you know,
yeah,
Elizondo types.
I'm not
And
denying it. I'm just unfamiliar
oh
with it. I just want to
yeah,
clarify that.
yeah, no, and the thing about this person is that they are supposed to be exceptionally good at it. This
Okay.
and as it goes on, she ends up talking about the accuracy rate, ends up bringing up Yuri Geller and how
It's
she
Ray
doesn't want to.
Skinwalker.
Yeah, yeah, but she
Had to
doesn't
do it.
she doesn't want to connect with him. She does she says that she like she talks about how she went to one of his meeting or one of his like speaking engagements or
Yuri
whatever.
Geller's speaking.
And yeah, and she ends up like the ring on her finger bent or something weird. She's not into it. And yeah, the whole, by the way, on a side note, I meant to bring this up earlier because who was it in the chat? I wanted to bring it up. Vermont Mike. He was like, Yuri Geller, they were stage spoons, weak metal. And
Yeah, it's
I've
possible. I mean, I told
well,
you he's not high on my list. I mean, it's also a case, just to play devil's advocate. My favorite, there was did you ever read the X-Men comics? They had like a
yes and
soft
no.
reboot in the early 2000s with Grant
Okay.
Morrison and Frank Quitely. And it introduced this whole storyline. It tried to put more real science into X-Men, which I thought was an interesting take.
Mm-hmm.
And they started with these whole series of mutants that have useless mutations. Like one's called Beak, just looks like a bird. That's it. Can't fly. Can't. He's into punk rock. It's just all these people have useless mutations. They can't be superheroes. They're just outcasts at that point, you know?
Yeah.
Which is a really interesting take, right? And so
Yeah.
what if you had sort of a useless spiky power, you know, that you get some notoriety, and then what are you supposed to do with it? Like,
Yeah.
like
Well,
I thought the good. I know you're gonna. I'm not gonna cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Before I forget, I thought the basis for Ghostbusters 2 would have been interesting if after Ghostbusters 1, all the ghosts stopped appearing.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're the Ghostbusters, but there's no more ghosts to catch.
Yeah.
And so they're just trying to trade off their name, right? Which is sort of what you can see, but then there's still ghosts running around. Like, no,
He-Man.
what if one of them, like Ray or Egon, decided, you know, we really need some ghosts, and they try to find a way to unlock the ghosts, right? To
pretty much the Frighteners.
Yeah, the Frighteners. So like
Yeah.
that's an interesting angle side to say. But
Yeah.
what if Yuri would just had a useless power, or it was just stage spoons? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and for the record, I don't have a strong take on Yuri either way. Or you know, it's like he exists. I don't know. I do. One time I was talking about with him to a friend who's like, you know, people hate him because he went on Carson and he failed. He couldn't do it. And then I was like, yeah, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of a big one, you know? And then he was like, yeah, but what if it's like getting a boner? Could you go on Carson and get a boner? And I was like, fair enough, dude. Fair enough.
Sometimes, bro, you could be with the person of your dreams. And I've experienced a similar where you were like with someone that I never thought I'd get in the realm of this person.
Yeah.
And here I am. And then you're like, what?
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
What?
Yeah.
Like life hits you in the face, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So, and it's like, and then if he was, you know, using or like, you know, and then you run into like the opposite side. What if they were weak spoons, but he could do it because what if his power was sometimes pretty weak? And if he used weak spoons, he can do it. But, you know, but that does discredit him, and it makes it a hard case to believe or whatever. But the one thing that I think, so to roll it back into my kind of where I'm going with this, anyways, in my mind, is I wrote off all of that stuff, like psychics. I wrote off, remote viewing, out of body experiences, and I've had several girlfriends throughout my life who've said that they have had out of body experiences and can do it, and all this kind of stuff. And I've always been like, okay, so because I believe them, internally, I didn't say this to them, but I thought, okay, so something happens and they believe it's that. It's some kind of like sleep paralysis potentially, and maybe it is, or maybe sometimes it is. And I had sleep paralysis one time, and it was like the equivalent of like how people say like the hag, but I didn't have a hag. It was a force, like just pushing me down. And if it wasn't for the fact that I said to myself, no, fuck you, I'm getting out. And then because whenever I have that experience, I get really, really angry. And
I've only had it twice.
I jumped out, but I woke up, and I was like, boom, you know what I mean? And I knew that my eyes had been asleep, or that my eyes had been closed. And I did it. So that's why I was like, okay, so that was sleep paralysis.
Yeah, I
And
remember having it in the 3rd grade one night. Didn't understand what that was.
mhm,
But that fear of dread or fear I had in 2004. I remember
mhm,
being in bed in my apartment and I felt there was someone in the house and it was going to get my roommate. And I
yeah,
remember not being able to move and I had to like yell through it. And I
mhm,
ended up yelling and then pushing through and waking up. Ah! Like, but it was this sense of innate fear or dread that there was something there,
yeah,
and that's the closest. I mean, and that was legitimate. You had to like break through something. So whatever biological condition causes that is pretty. I don't wish it on anybody, to be perfectly honest with
yeah,
you. It's not something I want to ever experience again. I don't go, wow, oh, I would like to study that more. Like, no, you can keep that shit.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. My thing about it is like I've thought about it before, and I'm like, would I want to recreate that to experience it again? And the truth of it is, like I said, I get so like I guess there's like almost a fight or flight activation, or activation internally that happens in
Mm.
that, and mine was fight. I was ready to go. I was like, you want to do this, demon? Let's do it.
Yeah, I
But
remember the feeling was I had to warn my roommate. It
you had
wasn't
to
like for
warn.
my preservation, it was to help my friend, like
Yeah,
that was the one I was worried about, which is so weird, right? You would think biologically you'd be worried about your own preservation, right? Like,
right.
so that
Yeah,
is, I don't know. Do you want to
yeah.
cover any chats? Do we have any chats going on here before we?
Yeah, we will,
All right.
yeah, for sure. I don't mean to have ignored the chat for as long as we did today. But yeah, no. Anyways, where I'm going with it is all of the people like Elizondo and those types. They basically, I think, are tacitly, if you read between the lines of what they're saying, are talking about how there's definitely is like a sort of a psychic physical connection between UAPs and the people experiencing them. And the government appears to believe this. Now, you can say, if you think it's all like bullshit, they also believed in studying the, Robert A. Monroe's Institute of Out of Body Experiences. They just delve into everything. And, Elizondo's had people who said those are demons and wanted him to not study them, or wanted him to leave them alone. And so when you look at it in those terms, you go, okay, so once again, we back to the thing we are talking about earlier with the remote viewers. Your worldview does kind of color these kinds of
Mm.
things. But I've been just kind of like, I've been like, okay, so maybe there is something to this stuff. Obviously, there's so much fraud associated with it that I will always be skeptical of it, though. I
So
can never.
if this remote viewer was hyper capitalist, they would look at it and go, they're trying to destabilize our economy by getting us to remove oil, like, or corporations from, taking care of the energy needs of the American. And I don't trust them because of, like, really, I'm being serious. Like, if you
Yeah,
take the
yeah, no,
info
it's
and you
good.
color it through a different lens,
Yeah,
like you could see, I'm not saying in an overtly villainistic way, like I'm demonizing someone's point of view. But like if you say
No, for
oil
sure.
companies to someone who's hyper capitalist, they're going to be like, that's our economy, that's America. Like, you know, these people are trying to wreck our economy. Like, so it's
Yeah.
interesting, right?
Yeah. No, and when I read the whole document, I didn't really get a sense that the remote viewer was giving when I say a slant, that's like not the way, or I should say wasn't giving
Bias.
um what their if their agenda was good or bad.
Hmm.
Just that their agenda was this person and what this person can do for getting a message out. So this person's their PR firm essentially that they're trying to use for whatever reason. And so yeah, I think you could read this document and you could literally take their agenda or the alien agenda or whatever as many ways as you want. But it does, I mean, and that's like the other side of it is another thing I wanted to bring up quickly is that when you look at everything from Travis Walton to Fred and Barney Hill, Fred and Barney,
Hey, Freddy boy.
the Hills, no, you and then with that stuff that one dude was saying this week about how we know who's in some of the saucers but not in others and that kind of jazz. All of the lore, if you will, implies that if there's more than one kind of like species at play, almost everything tends to turn it into the Mos Eisley bar in some little tiny way.
There's that
And
interview with Lazar where he's talking about the Ryan Sprague little 1 hour bit on Ryan on Bob
oh,
Lazar's a
I love
good
his show.
primer.
It's really good. It's like one of the best. Yeah.
Yeah. And but there's this one where Bob goes, I didn't really believe in all this stuff. And then I met John Lear, and he's telling me how there's 72 different alien species. And I thought he was out of his mind. And then he goes, and then I work at S4. And
Yeah.
blew my mind because Lear was friends with Knapp, right? So
Right.
that's
Right.
how it worked out. And who knows with Lear, man? But there does seem to be a consistent uh, dialogue about there being multiple species, and some look like blonde Norwegians, some are drones. Like the belief is that a lot of the gray aliens are just sort of kind of drones or something. They're not really
Yeah.
alive.
Travis Walton, I believe, saw the Norwegian ones, right?
Yeah, that's where Fire in the Sky, the movie, where Travis Walton goes, he did some great interviews with Art Bell and Knapp about this. Where he
Yeah.
goes, yeah, when they get on the spaceship, none of that shit happened. It was like Camino and bugs or Geonosis bugs, right? Like it was
Hmm.
Geonosis bugs and like larvae. And he's like, this is the part where I go, yeah, Bob Lazar is reading his script and they do this part, right? So they do everything legit until like he wants to get out of it and then it goes Hollywood. He's
Yeah.
like, Walton said that when he was on the ship, it was super clean. It was super, like a clean and super molded, similar to the way Lazar described the interior to the sports model,
Yeah.
but bigger, way bigger, right? And that
Right.
the aliens were like these like blonde Norwegians that were super tall. Like,
Yeah. I was watching a documentary on Amazon. I can't remember what it's called, but if you type in alien abduction or something like that, I'm sure it comes up. And one of the abductees was talking about how basically a lizard kind of alien was essentially raping her. But what it did was when she started to freak out, it kind of like had a screen come over it, and it literally in her mind became the most attractive human man she could imagine.
it's a scene from X-Men 3, right?
Is that a scene from X-Men 3?
Well,
I
yeah,
don't know.
there's a scene where Mystique is like trying to like sleep with Wolverine and she becomes, she turns into like
That would be
Anna
the best
Paquin.
person to date ever. I
Yeah.
mean, do you think she gives you shit for like, oh, what, I can't just be my like blue self?
Well, that's
Like,
why I
it's
figured
cool,
Magneto
but,
and her were together, because even though he's older, she could be, you know what I mean? Like if you find the right person, then but she turns into like young Kitty and he goes, "Oh God, no." That's like my daughter. She's like, "Well, I don't know.
yeah.
Like, you know what you're into?" Like
I don't know. It might be a Donald Trump type. Who knows? But no,
Ooh,
no,
shots fired.
no. But anyways, she said that, and then I always like to look at things almost like I look at Star Wars canon. Like, how does this change everything? And so when she said that, I was like, remember in the Travis? I thought I started thinking about Travis Walton. He kind of freaks out. Then they bring in the more human people. And I was like, what if they just went outside and turned on the screens and then came back and said, "Hey, Travis, how's it going? We are space Norwegians here to say hello," or
Yeah,
something like
funny.
that.
So my take on, you bring this up a lot. Like, how would aliens and UAPs or alien confirmations change Star Wars or science fiction in general?
Mhm.
My counterpoint to that argument is not in one single way, and the proof of this is the space race. The minute we actually put rockets into space and we learned how space worked, and we went to the moon and we learned how, you know, if you just set a rocket ship in orbit and you never stop it, it will just keep going infinitely. There's no sound in space. We know how space really works. We know how entertainment works. You know what I mean? And I just think it will change in no ways in terms of spaceships and galactic battles, because those are fun to watch. It
Yeah.
would be incredibly boring to watch a real space fight. You know, like
Oh,
it
for
works better
sure.
in a book. You know, like
Yeah, but I
the
mean,
minute.
even like, do we start having first contact kind of stories like Star Trek, but done in some different way that we haven't seen before? You know, stuff like that. But yeah, that's it. I think I think you're ultimately right, and I think when we talked about it last time, I said after reading Bob Lazar's stuff so much, or and looking into it for a couple of weeks as hard as I did, Star Wars starts to feel like steampunk all of a sudden because of like the rocket ships and stuff like that, the thrusters. And like if I was to sit down and write a space story based off of where my brain's at because of looking at Tic Tac UFOs all day and stuff, there is no Millennium Falcon thruster in the back. You know what I mean? It just
You know, Star Wars is Pirates of the Caribbean, and real life is Master and the Commander. You know, and those two movies came out the exact same year. And which one was deemed more cinematically fun to watch at the box office? Now, long term, Master and Commander is a better movie, right?
YouTube
But it's
started playing that for me yesterday. I was like, "Why are you playing Master and Commander?" YouTube.
because it's like someone's got to get the word out. But yeah, it's like, oh, it's depressing real life, right? Like people
Yeah,
just die of getting, like, they get one stab and then they die of a wound and they got to be buried at sea. Like that's it, you know.
yeah,
Whereas in Pirates of the Caribbean, you become a giant Kraken's undead pirate. You gotta like save everyone.
yeah. That's
It's more
true.
fun.
Plausible Denial asks, "Was he having a wank?" What he isn't having a wank? That's my question. Matt Tuine says, "Hey everyone, hey Matt
Matt,
Tuine."
I like
I
Matt
I,
Tween.
I like Matt Tuine's avatar too. Little
I
Java.
like Mad Tween's buddy Dan Tween. I want Chet Tween's the real asshole though. Like
Rick Jones, bitch, says you have to lay out what the rules are for the fourth dimension. Is the reader supposed to know? Good
the
point.
fourth dimension smell.
Smells like alien ass in here. I'll tell you that much.
It
No,
smells like Tic Tacs.
God, yeah. God, you know what was it? I think I was actually watching Travis Walton on Theories of Everything with Kurt Chase. I don't remember how to say his last name. And in it, I think he talks about somebody asked him like, "What did it smell like on there?" And I can't remember what he said now, but it was hilarious. It was like something weird. What it smelled like. It was like macaroni and cheese or something. Like his answer was just like, "What the fuck?" You
Well, it's
know?
one of those things about dreaming. Like one of your senses never works in a dream. So if you want to tell if you're dreaming, try to smell or
Hmm.
taste something, because you're gonna lose one of those.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Rick Jones says avatar or emojis. So Throntok says, "I have the Egyptian Book of Death with all the rituals and incantations." So that's why you couldn't. It wasn't that you had a late dinner tonight. You couldn't make it because you were doing some weird Necromonicon kind of Ash versus the Evil Dead stuff. We know what
He's
you're
like,
up
I
to.
want cats to come back and rule us.
John Schneps, rest in peace.
Yeah. Good dude.
And then, and then here's the link in case anybody needs it, who's watching the video and can't participate in the chat, to the UFO Joe article. And The Boy Who Could Smell the Future, copyright 2021.
That is a great children's book. God damn. Seriously, that would be a great, 40s, 50 something page children's book. The Boy Who Could Smell the Future.
There's going to be a great ruler. He's going to smell like SpaghettiOs.
But he smells his way through the possibilities in life, right? Like if I'm here, then all of a sudden he gets good things. Like
right. Yeah. And Lazar, we always talk about him, I guess. I should probably stop bringing him up. Because I mean, he is one of those people who you either put stake in or you don't, but we're never going to be able to prove. I don't think there's ever going to be proof that Lazar's telling the truth until the government vindicates him.
What if that Dennis guy finally comes out? Like
it's his boss, Dennis, that he pretended to be. No, Dennis is like, fuck him, pretending to be me on TV. Fuck you, Lazar.
That is such a move, though. Like,
yeah.
Even if you just made it all up, like you're like, yeah, I pretend to be my boss. Like, I never thought to go and create a new story and pretend to be like my clever. It's very clever, but it seems like such a move. If you want a revenge on some asshole.
No, it's so in the realm of, if I'm going to be fucked, I'm going to make sure you have a bad time too, because I know you're the one who's going to fuck me. And that's it, because for sure they had to take it seriously as if that was him. Even for a time, they at least had to treat him that way. Like weren't you telling a story about some like military thing before on here, and like they were just like, you knew that they were like going to try to scare you, and you just like had to be like, yeah, was it on the show? I hope I'm not bringing up something I'm not supposed to.
About what? About the anthrax vaccine, or when they tried to arrest me?
Yeah. When they they're like did like the whole scare thing, but you knew how that shit rolled, and you just kind of went with it. If that guy didn't have that attitude, that had to have been a very bad day. Where they're like, why were you on George Knapp's show, delving into all of the secrets or whatever?
Yeah, I had an injury. So people don't know, I had an injury in the military, and in the early, it really started in basic training. Like I couldn't even move my leg, but they'd let me stay through. I got back through it after 2 weeks of crutches and working through it, and I could walk again. But about a year into my tenure into Germany, the pain became unbearable, like in a way that was not right. And I'm like, look, I don't want to leave. I just want this fixed, or give me a job that doesn't involve breaking the shit out of my hips all day. Like I don't know what's going on. Anyway, they didn't want to do any of that because of the way USER worked at the time. And they put me in the gym. Okay, and then put me in physical therapy. Then one day a new first sergeant gets a hold of the unit, and then just calls me to his office and starts reading my rights, my Miranda rights, or the UCMJ equivalent of my Miranda rights. And they physically arrest me and put me in. They take me to JAG, and I sit there for 3 hours waiting to speak to the JAG officer. And then he's like, "What's going on?" He didn't know. So they tried this whole. They never charged me with anything, but they tried to, and they threatened me with court-martial. What they were trying to do was either to get me to admit I was lying, they called it malingering, or get me to fuck up in some way. And so they went back and checked every record of my physical therapy to see if I wasn't going. But I grew up in a military household, and a father who grew up checking. My father, I had to fold towels, and if the towels were just, you ever put towels on a shelf and they bulge a little bit?
Every time. I can't do anything right.
My dad would rip them all out and make me start over. They had to never bulge.
Yeah.
Right? Like he was, and so like when this stuff started happening, I just was like, I always had this fear that one day someone will look at my record, so I have to make certain I'm doing everything right because I cannot get into trouble.
Right.
And so I just happened to be the one. I had all these weird Miyagi like moves. Like I had all this training for this specific moment that if I hadn't, I would have easily crumbled. Now the analogy to Lazar would have been like, had I got onto like a radio program and then my name was like, my first sergeant's last name was Ashton, which whatever. But if I went on to say, yeah, my name's Ashton, and then he's listening to the radio and he hears this guy calling out the unit's bullshit, you know what I mean? And they call me in, but I used his name. I can only imagine my life would have been even 10 times worse than it already was.
Right. No, and that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. It's like you knowing how those dudes were, because if you experience like Lazar had already said that there was all kinds of crazy shit where like it'd like drop on the ground when you heard a siren and cover your eyes and all this stuff. So he already knows like how crazy those procedures are.
The minute the
And
military stopped looking at me, they let me go to the gym and physical therapy, and I never had to go to. I had to go to the formation in the morning, but never had to wear the uniform. The minute they did that, I'm like, oh, they're trying to catch me, because I knew it was a trick. So I have to make sure every day I'm at the same time. I'm wearing the same thing. I'm never carrying anything heavier than 10 pounds, which was my profile. For an entire year, I had to follow the stringent rules because I
yeah.
knew someone at some point was going to come to get me on them. And it had happened one day. So like, yeah, I believe Bob is paranoid enough inherently that he was preparing for that day to fuck with them in a way. I think from day one, he had a like, when you're in a bus and you're being flown out to something, you have to be thinking like, okay, how do I get out of this if it goes wrong? Like, what do I do if this goes inherently bad? I just feel like some people have that in them to always have an out plan. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally get it. Like I worked under in an office job with actually a great boss, but she was a Marine in the past and before coming to that position, and we all called her Sarge. And you had to have an answer for everything that you did. And working under her over the years, I just knew so I started just like having this little like breakdown of everything that I did that day and how I did it. So when she would start probing, because I knew the way that she would do it. And that's just me working an office gig. And I could imagine if that was like my life, so to speak, you know what I mean? Where I was like always in it. And Lazar seems, if he's telling the truth, like he would not have fit in that environment. Just looking at his
No, I didn't
personality,
fit
you
in the
know?
military.
Yeah.
Just let me tell you, just because they'd go to my room and see me drawing all night, and that I wasn't spending my whole time trying to become a better soldier. Like I wasn't reading training manuals, or I wasn't like super into like I didn't have the big guy. I wasn't cleaning my weapons, or I wasn't really into being a soldier. I was just doing it for a job. They took as an offense.
Yeah.
You know, this guy's just fucking, he's not really into it. You know, I'm like, yeah, I'm just here to do my time and get out. No, I'm wasting your money. No, you're not. You're not wasting your money on me because you got someone willing to be here versus some kid you dragged off the street to be. Like, come on.
Yeah.
But there is that thing where Bob's an inherent outsider. You know, he's not going to fit in, you know, and
Yeah.
especially if you realize, you know, you can't. I always figure he can't. How do I say this right? When you see what they were working with, if they were really working with that kind of stuff, like light that can pause in time or whatever, you realize I can't solve this. So they're going to figure out at some point, I can't solve this. What are they going to do to me?
Yeah.
You know, when I can't do this, like what actually happens?
Yeah. No, I mean that seems like a legitimate concern. You know, if you were working on that stuff at a certain level, how do you get out? Do they ever
And if
let you out? And
if
then,
I was
but
writing the Lazar screenplay, that is to me not like I guess the inciting incident for getting out. Like that's the dialogue that Bob needs to have with the audience to get you to sympathize with that situation. Like what happens when a black agency pulls you in? You know, you realize at some point I can't do what they want me to do. Will they kill me now? Like
yeah.
what actually happens to people when do they just let you out the black box agency? Like what do they do? I don't know. Maybe you make the biggest spectacle you can way in advance, you know what I mean? And use a
Yeah.
bunch of people's names so they know you're talking about them so that they can't, right?
Right.
Like,
Did I send you an article about like that supposedly we were using EMP weapons on UFOs and like using
yeah,
frequency stuff to figure out? Yeah, did we talk about that before
I I
on
want
the
to say
show?
you and I have talked about it, but it
In the
may have been
private,
prior
right?
to the show. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because like I found that stuff to be like super fascinating, and maybe I'll bring it up next week. I'll make sure to like
Yeah, the
get that
brief
stuff
gist of
together.
it for those listening is that, and we'll get into it into detail. The brief gist of it is that the military has the ability to use certain frequencies to detect UFOs, right? And
Hmm.
then use EMP technologies to take them down is basically it.
yeah. So there's a person who is insinuating that we've been doing that, and even relates to that. One of the England, like one of the big encounters that happened there, where the helicopters kept knowing like where it was going to show up. It appears, and that seems to like kind of tie into that kind of spooky idea. I hope that isn't true, because can you imagine if we were doing that? Like how, I don't know, bad that can
Well,
be, or
or if we
dangerous,
got
or
lucky and the only ones they can detect are the drones that alien Bezos doesn't care if get shot down. But what if it's
yeah,
a tic tac or something really threatening, right? Like,
yeah,
and it's, you know, and it's like the alien equivalent of Vince McMahon, you know,
yeah.
it's like, get these motherfuckers.
Yeah, there's this like story that Russia had a standing order to engage, shoot it down, capture it at all cost, or something like that. And then all of a sudden overnight something happened, and it was changed to do not engage, do not engage. And you
That
know,
time when Knapp was going to Russia to get all the declassified UFO data right after the fall of the
yeah.
Soviet Union, I just believe there's so much. I mean, he's done a lot of talk about that and stories about it, but I believe that that story and all those stories involved around that is such right for a TV show. You know, like
Mhm.
just even the basis of a series or something is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I had a professor. I did some of my undergrad outside work in Cold War studies. I was like, that sounds cool. I'll go do that. And this professor went over to Russia after the fall and was going through archives and looking at documents, not on UFOs, but just on general military stuff and things that he could get access to. And pretty much when we were having the conversation, he was like, it was a lot of peacocking. Like we were way more insane than they were in my estimation,
Yeah.
because of what we were able to do, like the amount of military spending that actually happened, and things like that. He was like, there was a lot of flubbing
They
on
were
their
just
end,
building things out of wood and making it look like it was
making it,
real.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yes. And so when when in knowing that or considering that, I have wondered how much of those documents are misinfo, and how much of it is, you know what I mean, was meant to
Oh
be like,
yeah.
if it was ever stolen, we would think that they had this or that. But
Yeah,
what is
they
fascinating,
legitimately just put a bunch of bullshit records in case they did lose the war and we had to take him. We just, I mean, the KG,
yeah,
the way the Russians use disinfo, this isn't just a Cold War technique. They're like
mm-hmm,
historically really good at this. Like
mm-hmm,
just
yeah.
turns out like this is why they're winning the disinformation war on the internet
I've seen
by
Rocky and Bullwinkle. I know what they're capable of. I know.
the movie or the cartoon.
The Rick McCollum produced on a lot of cocaine movie. No, I'm just kidding. I don't
There
have
was a
the
world in which Gary Kurtz produced there's a multiverse in which
multiverse.
Gary Kurtz produced the sequel to Rocky Bullwinkle. It's dark. It's
It's
dark as
dark.
shit. Yeah.
They win the Cold War and kill the moose at the end.
They
I mean,
kill
it's you know,
the
it's messed up.
electrotherapy Rocky. You know what I mean? Electroshock the squirrel.
Yeah, yeah. But anyways, so I don't know. Remote viewing. I don't know if I buy into it. I don't know if I believe it. I am on the fence. I am just like, and I'm the skeptical brain in me is just like, that seems unlikely. I start going, what if, what if they're able just to bring in sort of context clues in some very smart, almost computer way subconsciously that they don't even understand, and that's all that this is. But in this particular document, if you believe it's real, um, the coordinates were a big deal. Getting the coordinates right, and at one point they even remove her and change up everything, and she gets the coordinates right again. And so this person was supposed to have been pretty amazing, if I'm remembering the whole thing correctly.
Well, that's what I was saying about remote viewing in general, as it come across to me, is that finding coordinates seemed to be something that the military deemed could be done. They just didn't see how it was applicable to helping national security or real warfare.
Yeah.
because they couldn't even guarantee that the coordinates that they were seeing existed now or in the future or in the past. There was a question of time.
Yeah.
So like they could see a facility, but they didn't know if that facility existed now or would exist there 20 years from now, is also another factor into like what is that? You
Yeah.
know, and I've had an experience with seeing the future in a way that I understand. I don't know if that is the ability for the body, if any memory you've ever had exists now or if it exists throughout all of your time, because of the
Right.
way quantum mechanics works, right? Where one particle can exist, and like, this is the dumbest version of that. All right, I'm not even claiming to be a fucking genius on it,
Yeah.
but that two particles can exist simultaneously or be interacting with each other simultaneously across the universe in non-local ways. What if your ability to exist with your future self DNA wise exists because it's in a state, right, that doesn't know, like time is our perception, so it's the lens in which we're perceiving reality, it's not the way reality actually exists, right?
Right.
So it's not that they're seeing in the future, it's just that they're seeing quantum fluxes, right? That
Mhm.
because our brains interpret reality, interprets waveforms into a coherent structure, right?
Yeah.
That we can interact with it.
Yeah. And it's only usually good enough just to get us by. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I was thinking about this the other day on another side note, because the show should be called Side Note. On another side note, we it was about how animals and creatures that don't have a concrete form of communication, such as language, they tend to almost pass on memories, I guess, is like I don't know if this is the theory or if this is concrete knowledge, but I've heard it said several times now, so maybe there's something to it, that like animals pass it on. So like a mother's experience will of danger will then kind of be passed on, and then now that animal knows that is dangerous, and it just
Genetic
innately
memory.
knows. Yeah, genetic
Yeah.
memory. And I started thinking about that concept, and I was like, well, what if we did have it, or we do have it, we just don't use it, or it's kind of turned off? And what if we have all these different reasons for it? But what if that explains like a lot of these people who do remote viewing and out of body experiences, who claim that they have had past lives? What if it's genetic memory that they're sensing, and
Oh, a
not,
thousand percent. Yeah.
and not that you were some kind of Cleopatra or something, because I had an ex who had an aunt, or an aunt, not an ant. An ant's an animal, a little insect, an aunt, and
Back to the ants.
the aunt would have past life parties, and I had to go to one, and I was just a cynical asshole. I'm just like, I was fucking nobody. This is my first dumb life, and I'm over it already. I don't
It's like
want
inviting
anymore.
an analytical lawyer to a LARP session, right?
Yeah, not a good idea. And but everybody there, was Cleopatra, and you know what I mean. I was George Washington and all this shit, and
Look
I'm
at
just
my
like,
teeth.
so all of you guys were amazing people, and now you all live in San Diego. Like, what? And you just live in the suburbs of San Diego now? No, that doesn't make
Right.
sense, you guys. But if I wanted to give them a pass at
But
all,
then
it
you
would
find
be,
those kids that have these weird memories of their Aero Squadron. There was this one kid I remember who was like
yeah, I remember that
5 or 6. He had specific memories of all these people in an Aero Squadron in World War II. And he went to the VFW for their anniversary, and he was able to pinpoint every person out and give them specific recollections of this guy that they served with that died, that they were all friends with,
yeah,
and during World War II. And you look at that, and I'm like, I believe genetic memory is a real. I really do think there's something to that, based off my own experiences in life too. And
hmm
and most recently was so I'm adopted. I have a biological father I never met.
hmm
My mom never told me about him, but when I got adopted, apparently he had to come out and sign the papers, because
okay,
my adoptive father ended up on my birth certificate, whatever.
right. Here he
But after
is.
both my parents passed away, I always knew they mentioned I had a sibling. And I'm like,
Hmm.
I want to find this dude. So it took me a long time, but I figured out who the biological father was.
Mhm.
And I figured out who this guy was, reached out to the guy through the internet. I said, I swear it's not a catfish. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
look me up on the internet. You're going to see. So we talked, and then he lived out in Havasu, which was where my mom had driven from when
Have
she
a
was living.
sue, bro.
Yeah, and so
Party.
I'm driving to Havasu from Phoenix, and there's
Mhm.
this part where you go down a hill, and you make a left-hand turn and you go down. There's like this lake, the Lake Havasu kind of like lake, and you go across a bridge. And I had consistent dreams about that when I was in the third or fourth grade. Very memorable dreams about going down this mountain, down this thing, and going and with these specific reeds and stuff. And when I go down, I'm like, motherfucker.
Yeah.
Like, this is, what is that? You know what I mean? Like, that's not like, oh, I can see the view. No, I don't know what that is. I think the most scientific explanation I come up with is genetic memory, and that genetic memory doesn't exist in our sense of time. Our time is a perception of our own brain, you know, making sense of the universe. If I had to just put my layman's claim on it, you know?
Yeah. No, I discredit or, discount nothing. I always go like, yeah, that's wild. As I've had that too. I've had that sense of deja vu where I've been like with my kids in a very weird place. Like it happened to me one time in Legoland or San Diego again. One time in Legoland or Carlsbad, and we stayed at a motel, and I had to get something out of a bag, and it was like for my daughter's hair. And I dreamt this, and then we were doing it, but my daughter was small at the time, and we really didn't do her hair that much. She's kind of wild. And we were going to go to Lagos, so I was like going to do it this time. And I was like, shit, that's really weird. I literally dreamt this before. I feel like I did anyway. And so yeah, I've had that kind of stuff too, and just that's not like a genetic one, obviously, but just
if I had the Bigelow money,
yeah,
and I could try to pursue one of these paranormal topics that I think would produce a tangible result, genetic memory would be the thing I'd spend my time on.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, if they were, and that kind of thing, like as we get into this, whole fucked up world where Facebook is able to put crazy hats on our heads that allow us to control interfaces and stuff. That kind of stuff, that kind of digging,
in my head, I see those hat hands from the 80s that used to clap, but now like they have hands.
well, like, wouldn't it be crazy if like when you have somebody who claims these certain things, that they've like these regressions, if we can get video of them, and then we would be able to like look at the regressions and be like, is this shit historically accurate? You know what I mean?
Your autoimmune system or your genetic are able to record every experience you had, or you're able to pass on genetic memory, especially like I said, in animals who can't speak, that's literally where, how do animals know all these, what we consider to be instincts are genetic memories, right?
Yeah.
And what if we could transcode that signal into something viewable?
Right.
Like, then you unlock the literal time machine, right? Like, how far back can people's DNA go? Like, since we all seem to, like, since the majority of humanity shares DNA with Genghis Khan because of the raping and pillaging of the entire known world at the time, like,
he wasn't like that. I saw him on Bill and Ted, and he seemed like a pretty cool dude.
That's the writers, the Thundergrunts guys cover Bill and Ted, and when they get to Genghis Khan, they go, yeah, it's just best to keep some shit fun.
Yeah.
I guess the original draft, that was actually a skit. The screenwriters did that as a comedy skit.
Yeah.
And they initially had Hitler and really questionable historical figures, but they wanted to make the movie more marketable. But Genghis Khan was that one where it's like, if you know who Genghis Khan was, maybe you shouldn't put him in, but whatever.
Yeah, they're in the Ziggy Piggy scene. They're the actors in the Ziggy Piggy moment with Napoleon.
Yeah. And but the Genghis Khan guy, that's the guy from Big Trouble in Little China, right? Like the same actor. He's like in
I think so.
He's in a bunch of those movies from the 80s.
Yeah.
Super recognizable.
Yeah. And I think I'm gonna go watch Bill and Ted after this right now.
Good move.
It's a pretty good idea. But yeah, so I think we covered probably everything. And wait, do we have something else? Wait, eating Dollar Tree cookies, man. Knick Knack Paddywhack show. How's it going? Eating Dollar Tree cookies. Dollar Tree cookies, you never know. Those might get you high. You never know what you're gonna buy at Dollar Tree. You never know what's inside that.
People
stuff.
don't trust vaccines because they might have microchips, but I don't trust the dollar cookies. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
What's in those?
I bought a. I was like, I'm gonna live dangerously, and I bought a bag of meatballs from the Dollar Tree. They're like frozen meatballs, and I was like, we were making spaghetti, and I was just like, let's just try it. You know what? It wasn't that bad.
You ate enough of those meatballs and the SpaghettiOs back in the day. It couldn't be worse.
Right? Yeah. If I'm alive still, I think I'm gonna live through anything at this point. You know? Yeah, spaghettios with hot dogs. So,
well, they had hot dogs and meatballs, and you'd bite in the meatball, and it was just, I can remember the texture.
Yeah.
It was stiff. You know, it was the word, I think, stiff. And
so I remember it being either stiff or mushy, and the fact that it was one or the other was what never sat right with me. Consistency is key,
especially in the same can.
yeah, especially in the same serving. No,
one of them went bad. No. Oh
no. Yeah, but we will be back next Saturday talking UFOs. Jason should be back. Rob is always welcome. Rob has
probably be back,
busy
man.
life. Yeah,
I'll be honest. With the passing of my bud, I'm probably gonna make more time for the UFO shows. It's
for the UFO. Okay, cool.
I feel a connection to my buddy.
Yeah,
when we do this. You know,
nice. Yeah, and sorry about your friend. I appreciate. It's terrible. Yeah. I think we will do more of a case study kind of thing. That was the kind of what we were aiming for, and then that way we could kind of just talk about it and riff on it or whatever. And I wanted to talk about this Kit Green piece just because I thought it was, I don't know if I believe it, not suggesting that you do or don't, but I just think that it's a fascinating piece of bullshit science fiction, or what a crazy piece of history that leaked out. You know, it's one spots.
Shamalama ding dong.
Yeah, and I suggest if you found like that stuff fascinating, read the whole thing because it is fun. It's a fun read. UFO Joe's website is pretty rad. I dig it. I just like going through it. I have no idea how authentic stuff is. I'm newer to this stuff. And even if it was supposed to be authentic, who knows? So just, always use your best critical thinking skills, and also keep
don't murder
open.
Anyone over this info.
Don't ever. Chances are, if your conclusion in anything is murder someone, it's the wrong conclusion.
Unless it's a bag of Lay's salt and vinegar potato chips, or better at Tim's. Tim's is a better one.
But what if it's Hitler when he was a baby, and it turns out that baby's Hitler, and he time travels back? What do I do? Do I do it?
I'm going to end on this. My favorite discussion in time travel is in the opening to 11/22/63, where the main character is talking to his buddy Al, who Chris Cooper plays in the show, and they're talking about paradoxes, and he goes, "Well, what if you go back and the main character that James Franco plays goes, what if you go back in time and kill your grandfather and you'd never be born?" And then Al, and the audiobook does this great, I don't know if he saw Chris Cooper or who saw who first. He goes, why the fuck would you want to do that? And he had to stop and go, all right, why would I want to go back in time and murder? Just like, what would that, why would you do that?
Why would you do that? I mean, just like, I want to commit suicide, but I don't want to do it myself. So I can kill this guy. That's better.
I want to erase myself from existence to prove what?
Yeah. That kind of stuff always fucks with my head too. Cause I'm like, if I'm experiencing if I'm not in the dominant timeline, so to speak, if you want to look at, if there is, even if it's like if it's a circle or whatever, I just go like, if I'm like right now in Echo and other stuff is happening in the future and those are time travelers coming back, I hate that idea. I want to live in the dominant timeline, however it works.
You love the Loki series, sat very well with you. You want some order to it.
I want to be in the present.
Right.
Yeah. But
and I like the what if.
He says, Thrawn says James Amato was Genghis and was in Die Hard. He's in Die Hard, and he's in Big Trouble in Little China. He has that great candy bar moment, which was improv, by the way. Yeah.
That actor did that when he jumped over. He looked in there and then started chewing on the candy bar. That totally improv. It's great. It's brilliant.
But yeah, thanks to everybody. We'll see you guys next week. And do not believe the great Project Blue Book actor, disinfo artist Mark Hamill.
will you play some kind of game with making Star Wars